Michael had suffered with irritable bowel syndrome since he was a kid, which led him to take a deep dive into alternative health to find solutions. Not only was he able to correct his IBS, but he actually became a health coach himself. Join me as I talk to Michael about how he's helping people overcome their autoimmune disease, reverse type 2 diabetes, and even correct low thyroid, all with diet and lifestyle changes. Thanks for joining me today for another episode of Hunger Hunt Feast. With me is Michael Rutherford. Michael's a functional nutrition therapy practitioner and a certified primal health coach. Michael, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Can't wait to dive into some great info, I'm sure, is what we'll go through.
Absolutely. Well, what caught my eye, your story is one that I've come across with other coaches. You really had your own struggles, your own journey with health, and that searching for your solutions really led you into not only a deeper knowledge, but one that you're sharing with other people, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I think, myself and a lot of my colleagues, that is, like you said, you've seen it a lot. I think that's where so many of us in this kind of holistic alternative world of health have really had to do that ourselves. We had to kind of solve our own problems because so much of the allopathic Western model has failed so many people with chronic health solutions.
Absolutely. Yeah. Most doctors probably wouldn't know what to do with a lot of digestive issues, or even, some people have mood disorders or eating disorders that they're not sure how to deal with it. And the doctors have no clue as far as nutrition and how to actually address the root cause of the problem. They're giving you something to help with your symptoms. So, well, let's dive into your story. How old were you when you started having the health problems?
Man, I was young. Honestly, I tell people all the time, it's sadly one of my earliest childhood memories is digestive problems, like being in the bathroom miserable and just like crying out for anything because it was so bad. And then it didn't help. My parents were divorced and my dad went through a stint of like 3 years of vegetarian, which
Oh,
is where I primarily lived. Yeah, so we went probably from when I was probably about 7 to 10 years old. I was vegetarian primarily when I was at my dad's full time, and then I go to my parents lived in different states, so I went to school with my dad, and whenever we were on winter or summer break, I would go to my mom's. Well, she wasn't vegetarian, which meant I'd go from a vegetarian diet and lifestyle to eating meat every day, which if you have ever done any amount
ugh.
of vegetarian, like that does
Yeah.
not go well in your system if you don't know how. And I already had digestive issues. So you throw that on
Oh,
top of it. And I would spend the first week at my mom's just absolutely miserable. And then, so I progressed. I had, IBS, really alternating IBS, going back and forth between diarrhea and constipation. Really never seemed to have any rhyme or reason to it. I tried having no dairy, and I was on soy milk for a while, and then that started bothering me because, this was the 90s, and so everything was soy. So I was on soy milk for a while, and then that started bothering me. So I went back to regular milk, and I tried all the high fiber cereals and adding fiber and this, and nothing ever made a difference. And on
mm,
top of it, I go through high school as a wrestler, and I, cutting lots of weight. So I had a very unhealthy relationship with food, and it wasn't like I had bad body image in that, that wasn't my, reason behind anything. It had nothing to do with body image, just the
right.
need to make weight.
Right.
But it was horrendous. I mean, I was intermittent fasting years ago before it was ever cool. We didn't think of it that way. When you're 15, 16 years old, you shouldn't be because you're trying to grow, which resulted in several injuries. I
Mm,
dislocated both my collarbones. I've sprained both my ankles multiple times. I've broken multiple fingers. I had a hairline fracture in my sternum,
whoa.
primarily because of the lack of nutrition while exercising strenuously with weightlifting and training for wrestling and running. And I mean, it was horrendous. So I already have digestive issues. We throw all of that on top of it. I went into, as I graduated high school, I went into the culinary industry, working 10, 12, 14-hour days, five,
Mm,
6 days a week, all on hard concrete floors. I was taking almost twice the recommended daily limit for ibuprofen almost every single day for probably 6, 7, 8 years. I was
oh my
taking,
gosh. That's
yeah,
horrible
I
for
was
your
taking,
stomach.
Oh, it's horrible. It's absolutely terrible. So on top of having digestive issues, I'm now taking more than, so a prescription strength ibuprofen for context is 800 milligrams. I
Mhm.
was taking at least twice that a day, sometimes two and a half. I was taking upwards of
Wow.
2,000 milligrams a day. And that was just to kind of dull the pain. It was still really there. And of course, I was just like, well, I was told at like 19 by a chiropractor that I would probably have knee replacements by the time I was 30
Whoa.
because of the meniscus. So the padding between my knee was so worn down because of, again, being undernourished and overtraining, probably,
Yeah.
which is what so many people do now to try and keep their weight down, right? Like they're just like eat less and move a ton more and work really hard. And so I did that for, I was like that for years. And it was interesting when I was about 26, probably about 26 or 27. I was over at my dad's for dinner. And he had just, for his own health journey, kind of started reading. He decided he wanted to read the newest 50 books in health and nutrition. And he wanted to do that in a year. And he ended up doing it in like 6 months. In the first year, he ended up reading like 100 books.
Oh, wow.
But he was so blown away by what he was learning about everything that him and I just share very similar, views on things. And he knows I've always, because of wrestling and sports and fitness, I've always been interested in health and wellness from a general standpoint. So we just had the conversations, and he started talking about paleo a bit, and we slowly got into keto with him probably the next month or two. And I was like, I'm just going to try this. It just makes sense. Like when you learn about paleo and how humans ate for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, it
Right.
just makes sense. Like it's just logical. So I was really just like, yeah, I'm going to try eating this way.
Right.
I didn't think it was going to solve any problem. I didn't think it was going to get rid of my pain. I didn't think it was going to solve my digestive issues. If you would have asked me at that point in time, I would have told you I was healthy. I looked relatively similar to what I do now. I wasn't obese. I didn't have hypertension. I didn't have diabetes. I didn't have any of these problems. But my digestion was a wreck. I couldn't go a week without severe digestive issues. It became a normal part of my life. I just thought that's how I was going to be.
Mm.
Was just dealing with that. But it was bad. I was afraid to go on long hikes. I was afraid to go out on a boat fishing or anything that would put me away from a bathroom for hours on end was terrifying to me. Like I just didn't do it because
Gotcha.
there were mornings where if I woke up and drank tap water, first thing,
Mm.
I'd be in the bathroom.
Wow.
Tap water. Like that's how sensitive I never knew what was going to trigger it. So the idea of being away from a bathroom is terrifying.
Sure. Wow.
Like, and so, I started implementing this stuff, and all of a sudden, after about 4 to 6 weeks, I stopped, and I was like, "Man, when was the last time I had a bathroom problem?"
Hmm.
I was like, "I haven't been reaching for the ibuprofen as much." At this point, my twin, so I guess this was 6 years ago. My twins had just been born. They were like 3 or 4 months old, so I was working 2 jobs so that their mom could stay home 6 to 7 days a week, 70 plus hours a week, plus waking up to help in the middle of the night because there was two of them. She couldn't do it all by herself. And so I was running off of, I'm doing this on like 4 hours of broken sleep. I wasn't needing caffeine as much. At that point, I was drinking like 2 quart-sized containers of coffee every morning and soda at night. Yeah.
Woo.
And so I cut out the soda because I went paleo. So it was cut out the sugar, cut out the soda. I was probably down to one of those coffees a day. So my caffeine consumption way down. I just
Mm.
didn't need it anymore. I wasn't reaching for the ibuprofen. At that point, I didn't even know the dangers of it. I just didn't need it anymore. I switched to minimalist footwear, which again made an even bigger difference, which confused a lot of the kids I was
Yes.
working with. So like I'm wearing this like zero padding shoe on hard floors, but it actually made me feel better. I had less pain.
Hmm.
So it's like everything at this point, my mind was blown. I'm like, I know nothing at this point. Like everything I thought I knew, more padding, more, extra supportive shoes, eat more fiber, eat all these grains and eat whole grains. And it's just everything was flipped upside down.
Your
So at that
paradigm
point, I was like,
completely
oh,
shifted.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, give me your books. I need to read all of them. I need to go through. I ended up finding, because of it, I came across Mark Sisson and Primal
Mm.
Kitchen and Primal Nutrition and Primal Blueprint. Saw that he had a program. At the time, it was actually called Primal Health Expert. It wasn't even a primal health coaching program.
I remember
It
that.
was just to
His
be
own
an expert on,
certification. Right.
yeah, it
Exactly.
was just
Yeah.
to be an expert on primal health. And actually right before I finished, I had like 2 modules left. and they added like 5 modules and called it a health coaching program. I was like, oh, come on. I was right there.
They moved the goal line for you.
Yeah. So now, but now it became a health coaching certification. They added some coaching modules and they're on top of just the education, which was fantastic. I also knew of the NTA, the Nutritional Therapy Association, and I knew that I wanted to go through that program. But at the time, Mark's program was $999. It was $1 down and like $99 a month until you paid it off. I was like, I can do that.
Right.
Whereas the NTA was like $3,800. So I was like, okay, like that's a goal, but I can't do it yet. I just had 2 kids that were born. Like, can't do it yet, but that was my goal. And eventually, probably about a year later, I had the Primal program paid off, and I did sign up for the NTA, went through that. I've been working with clients for 5 years now. I've worked with hundreds of clients. I've helped clients lose probably thousands of pounds. We've gotten them off of dozens, if not hundreds of medications, multiple chronic diseases put in remission from diabetes, hypothyroidism, we've got hypercholesterol issues, hypertension, depression, digestive issues. I mean, you name it, and we've reversed it. I think the 3 biggest things is reversing diabetes, getting people off of acid blockers and PPIs, and completely eliminating their digestive problems. I now work in hypothyroidism, which has been really cool. I've talked to dozens of natural practitioners who think that once someone is on thyroid medication and hormone support, that they're going to be on it for life. And I've got probably a dozen clients who will very much tell you different. They've been on medication. I had a client who was on it twice a day, which isn't that common. And she's now off it completely. Her and her husband he has Hashimoto. She has non-autoimmune hypothyroidism, or did. Both of them have been off hormone support for 3 years now, and they've stayed off of it.
Wow.
And I've got naturopaths and different holistic doctors and practitioners who are like, oh yeah, like that doesn't happen. I'm like, I've got a lot of cases that tell different, and their labs look great. So and a lot of this comes from truly understanding root cause. And that's what everything I do is
right.
I made a post on Instagram probably a couple months ago. I think the big word in functional medicine and holistic health right now is inflammation. It was a couple of years ago. Everything was inflammation. Inflammation is the root of everything. Inflammation isn't the root of anything, because inflammation doesn't just happen on its own.
That's another symptom.
If we understand it as a fire, right? Yeah. Like your house didn't burst into flames like randomly. Like it was not an act of God that your house bursted into flames. It's the same in your body. Something caused that inflammation. So it's like, where does that root cause stop? You have to truly continue to dig. If you just say, oh, inflammation is the cause, cool. You're just going to have to sit there and take curcumin and fish oil for the rest of your life to keep that at bay. Why not remove what's causing the inflammation? And then you don't need to take a handful of anti-inflammatories every day.
Makes sense. That's excellent. So you're going after like the cytokines, the inflammatory kind of things that are creating the inflammation in the system. So
so we can look at that. Yeah, we can look at there's tons of inflammatory markers. It seems like everyone knows about CRP, which is really only an acute inflammatory marker. So a lot of people can have tons of inflammation and their CRP be normal. So we have to look at, we could look at probably about a dozen different blood markers for inflammation. And the more we look at, the better picture we can get to see what might be causing that. And we can look, is there gut issues? Is the digestion a wreck? What's crazy is we can have a digestive problem and no digestive symptoms. And we could look at celiac disease. Celiac disease is the destruction of the intestines from gluten, from the gliadin protein. And something like 30% of those with celiac disease have zero digestive symptoms.
Zero digestive symptoms.
It can show up as neurological issues is the most common. But it could be skin issues. They have symptoms, but they're not linked directly to digestive symptoms. So a lot of people go misdiagnosed, or it can take them 5 to 10 years before getting a diagnosis for so many autoimmune diseases, but especially directly related to the digestion, because it can show up as other problems.
Gotcha. So the celiac rears its head elsewhere, and they don't consider it celiac. So it goes on. They're looking in the different place. They're not seeing.
They're putting them on antidepressants and things like that, because it's showing up as problems in the brain. Yeah, because we now know that there's a gut-brain axis. And it
Right.
goes both ways. You could get a concussion within 12 hours, you have signs of leaky gut.
Whoa. Whoa.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Huh.
We
So
look at thyroid. I worked in thyroid as my primary focus. We could see there, doctors don't even run antibodies for thyroid, even though something that 70 to 80% of hypothyroid cases are rooted in autoimmune problems in Hashimoto's.
hmm.
Almost no doctor runs them. And the reason is because it doesn't change their approach. So with autoimmune diseases, in
Ah,
allopathic medicine, the main approach is biologics, immunosuppressants, steroids, things like that. Well, they don't work for Hashimoto's. They don't really do anything, and there can be a lot of negative potential side effects to those.
sure.
So the pros don't outweigh the cons. So it's like, why even bother? So if they're not going to bother to change their course of treatment based on the diagnosis, why even bother know the diagnosis? So a
Mm.
lot of people, and what's interesting about autoimmunity is antibodies are the first thing that become present. There's no symptoms. There's no change in, let's say for thyroid, for example, there's no change in the thyroid numbers. It's just elevated antibodies. I have a client right now. We call it the autoimmune spectrum. She has elevation of antibodies. Her thyroid numbers are totally fine. She doesn't have symptoms related to it, but she's on that spectrum. She doesn't do anything. Eventually, there will be enough destruction of the thyroid that it will lead to a problem and it will lead to symptoms. And this is why people can take years and years and years to get a diagnosis. And I've had patients or clients who have been hypothyroid for years. They've been on medication for over a decade, and the doctor never ran their antibodies. We run them and they're sky high. No one even bothered to look because it doesn't change anything for them.
Hmm.
But we know, I have a good friend and colleague, Dr. Robert Abbott, over in Virginia, and his team, and they work with autoimmune cases, and they are now, I think they're working on their fourth published study for using the autoimmune protocol to address specific autoimmune diseases. Their first one was Hashimoto's, and they saw in 6 weeks of a functional medicine approach, there was drastic improvement of symptoms in labs.
Wow.
So it's like the data's there, it's showing up. We have thousands and thousands of, singular testimonies and anecdotal stories of, changing your diet and lifestyle to have a profound effect on pretty much every single autoimmune disease.
Hmm.
But, doctors don't,
Right.
allopathic medicine doesn't see this. They don't like anecdotal evidence. Oh, it's, that's just you. You're right, it's
Right.
me. It worked for me. So don't take that away from me. I don't care if it's just me or not. It
That's
still
where
works.
solutions start with an
Exactly.
N of
That's
one. That's right.
Exactly. That's how
Yeah.
we find the data because it worked for someone
And
or
you
it
see if
caused,
it works again.
yeah, or a poison. You know how we find out things are poisonous? Because someone ate it and died or got
Yeah.
sick from
Right.
one person.
Lesson learned there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some examples of ways that, so you determine that they have antibodies that are affecting their thyroid. So then you determine what is stimulating those antibodies. Is that in their lifestyle? Is that what?
Yeah. So let's just walk through autoimmune disease as a whole. What's
Okay.
really interesting is that they're all more or less the same as far as their pathology. So there's a few things that have to be present for an autoimmune disease to take place. So
Okay.
one is genetics. Genetics do play a part. They don't play a part on whether you get them necessarily. It really could, the genetics primarily figure out which autoimmune disease you're going to get.
Mm.
And most people will have multiple susceptibilities to more than one. We all have, thousands and 23,000 different genes in our genome.
Right.
And some of those are going to increase your risk and potentially decrease your risk for different autoimmune diseases. But those have to be there so that your body is essentially more susceptible to that. We also have to have triggers. So we have to have something that actually triggers a response in the immune system. And we essentially have to have leaky gut because that is the doorway into the body that triggers the immune system in the first place. So leaky gut, or more accurately described as gut permeability, the way I describe this, and it's perfect, I'm looking at it right now, is a window screen. So if you have a screen in your window, or if you live in this, I grew up in Florida, and you have a screen enclosure, right? That screen is designed to allow air in and keep debris, leaves, tree limbs, and things like that out. Well, again, I grew up in Florida. We grew up with hurricanes, right? And so, or just any bad tornadoes, any bad storm, they come and throw a big old tree limb through that screen. Well, guess what? Now bugs can get in, the leaves can get in, your pool's a mess because all those things get in that weren't supposed to. If you fix it, cool, awesome. One, you have to patch it up, but you also have to remove all the junk that did come in, right?
Right.
Well, that's kind of how your gut works. The endothelial layer within your gut is a single cell layer. So it's very fragile. It's replaced
Yeah.
every 3 days.
Mm.
And if it gets punctured for a variety of different things, inflammation, for example, is going to begin to break that down. Now, how did that inflammation get there? Poorly digested food, dysbiosis, ibuprofen and NSAIDs, all of
Right.
these things can create inflammation and break down that barrier. Well, once and again, we're talking about microscopic holes in the barrier. We're not talking about creating sepsis where actual feces are getting into your body, but we're talking about on a microscopic level, bacteria, viruses, and proteins are getting absorbed into your bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there.
Mm.
Well, this is where we can begin the autoimmune storm. Your immune system actually is incredibly awesome. It's essentially it's your body's military, and it's doing what it's supposed to do. It is creating antibodies against these proteins and bacteria and viruses and things that get through into your bloodstream, like it's supposed to. The problem comes, for example, we can take gliadin, the protein in gluten responsible for celiac disease. Really, there's actually multiple kinds of gluten protein. When people refer to gluten, we're primarily referring to specifically the gliadin protein
Yeah.
because it's what's truly responsible for celiac disease. Well, that gliadin protein looks very similar to a portion of your thyroid. So it's a protein and it looks
Interesting.
so that's why gluten and there are casein molecules, so a type of dairy protein that look almost identical to gliadin. So we call this cellular mimicry. So these things look almost identical, and so your body mistakes them. They just created a bunch of antibodies to this gliadin because it wasn't supposed to be in your body. And then those antibodies, your immune system is circulating around, they come across your thyroid. And they're like, oh, we're supposed to attack that. And so they do. So now we start attacking the thyroid over and over and over. And the more we get of that protein, the more fierce that military gets. And the more it finds that and attacks it, to eventually we're going to have so many antibodies present and we have such destruction of the thyroid that now we're going to start becoming symptomatic and have shifts in our labs because our body can't repair that tissue quick enough that the immune system is breaking it down. And this is essentially how all autoimmune diseases happen. Now, they can attack different tissues based off of different susceptibilities, different genetics, and things like that that can allow this to happen. But we have to have this environment of gut permeability of these big triggers. It could be heavy metals, it could be dysbiosis, it could be toxicities from chemicals and a lot of different things that now begin to create this storm. Stress, great example. We see women and we'll talk about why, for two different reasons, why women suffer from both thyroid issues as a whole and autoimmune diseases more than men. Well, women tend to take on a lot more stress than men.
Mm.
They also have a more complex system because they have way more complex hormones, which can cause a disaster in a lot of different things. They also have a much higher toxic burden. We look at makeup and skincare products. I mean, a man might use shampoo and body wash. Half of us use a 2-in-1. That's just the same thing for everything, right?
Maybe some deodorant now and then.
Maybe some deodorant now and then. And, we try not to just scrub it a little bit, like we're done.
Yeah.
Right? And so we put very few things on our body. Whereas
Gotcha.
women are putting a dozen products on their body before they even leave the house.
Right.
And there's hundreds of chemicals that are getting exposed. We see babies are born with over 200 foreign chemicals in their blood at the time of birth. They've tested the umbilical cord and found over 200 toxins.
Wow.
And that's after what the body has filtered out. That's just what's getting through. Never mind the probably thousands that are circulating in that mother's body.
Wow.
And that's probably the time in which a woman is hopefully at least being the most conscious of what she may be doing. We just simply don't know. I mean, there's something like almost 35,000 chemicals that are allowed in beauty and hygiene products, basically completely unregulated. That's a lot.
Gotcha. So it's basically an overloaded system that creating the of chemicals is trying to filter out and try to protect itself from. We can't.
Then we just look at water and air and plastics and everything, fragrances and everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you eliminate I mean, if you're, so are you looking for specific, like with, let's say with thyroid, are you looking for specific antibodies that would
Yes. So,
target thyroid? Okay.
so we technically have about 3 antibodies specific to the thyroid. 2 are related to Hashimoto's. We also have autoimmune disease called Graves that is hyperthyroid. So it would be overactive.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those can be present in Graves, and Graves also has a specific one called TSI. Most cases of thyroid disorder and autoimmune are hypothyroid, so Hashimoto's makes up the vast majority. Something like 80 to 90% of hyperthyroid cases are Graves related and autoimmune. And some people can actually have both. People can have both Hashimoto's and Graves, whereas they can become a real mess. Yeah, their thyroid is just really getting screwed up. So within Hashimoto's, which is again primarily what I work with, we have the TG or thyroglobulin antibody and the TPO, which is thyroid peroxidase antibody. What's really frustrating, so about 60 to 70% of cases of Hashimoto's only have one antibody. And so many, and I think I always get a mix. I can't remember which one is the primary one. And so if a doctor runs antibodies, they may only run the one, but they're still missing 30 to 40% of the population. So it's like it's not like this is an expensive test. I think they're each probably like $40 to $50. Like it's not like this is a test that costs hundreds of dollars. Like this, and it can be covered by insurance if you're suspected to have thyroid disorders. And so it's like, why is this not being done? And again, it just simply doesn't change their course of action. Now, again, there's a lot of even holistic practitioners that are getting this wrong. I got into thyroid as a whole because of my boy's mother. She deals with thyroid issues, and this was early on before I really knew as much as I do now about thyroid. And I fired 4 different naturopathic doctors who could not get things right. I mean, I live in the Northwest, right?
Right.
We get
that's about as naturopath as you get, right? Yeah,
well, but
your food is like 100 miles away at most.
Yeah, well, and seasonal depression is a massive issue here because right now we're in the middle of just tons. I might get sunshine like once every 2 weeks for months on end. So seasonal depression is huge because vitamin D levels, and we know that it's primarily linked to low vitamin D. She dealt with seasonal depression. She had signs of hypothyroidism. Again, vitamin D is highly linked to that as well. And this doctor didn't run. After I asked for it, I gave him a list of labs, say, hey, can you run these? Vitamin D was one of them, and he didn't run it. When she had all the reasons and symptoms to get it run, I'm like, this is pointless. Like it literally, I've worked in a doctor's office as a practitioner, and I used to put in orders for labs all the time. It literally takes seconds to add a lab.
Yeah,
like,
no,
this
it
is
would
not a ton of work. It's a
and
couple
vitamin
clicks
D
of
is
a
not
button.
that far out. That's something we should all be getting tested.
Up here during the winter, every single patient who goes to the doctor should be getting their vitamin D tested. Why aren't they? Hell, especially with everything going on right now and the evidence we see, everyone should know their vitamin D status.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. I mean, even in like where I am in the Nashville sort of bordering Midwest, we get tons, it's overcast. We get lots of dark days. Unless you're living in Florida or Texas, I'd say you probably need to be, or, San Diego, you probably need to have your vitamin D checked. Or you're just shut up in an office. Like many of us are shut in. We're working from home, working in an office. We don't get out much. So you're looking for antibodies that specifically trigger, you said 2 or 3 that you would look for that would show up in a blood test. That simple?
Yes. So it's a very simple blood test. Literally any lab can run this. Any doctor can order them. You don't even need a doctor. Now, this was amazing where we're moving now is you can order just about any lab you want online. Now you're going to pay out of pocket. It's going to be cash pay.
Yeah.
Now I've worked with a couple of companies. I get great practitioner costs for my clients. So for example, so let's say if you go to a Western medicine doctor, so a traditional doctor, and you're like, hey, I suspect I have a thyroid problem. They're going to run your TSH. Here's the problem. So that's called your thyroid stimulating hormone. This is a big problem. It's not a thyroid hormone. It's the signal that your brain sends to your thyroid to produce enough hormone.
The T3 and T4, right?
Yeah. Now, they may, if you're lucky, run your total T4. If you're really lucky, run your free T4. It's better than just your TSH, but it can still be a problem. So let's break this down, why this could be a problem. Let's look at TSH, for example. Well, what if the brain isn't working properly? I explain this as an employer and employees. So the brain is the employer. The TSH is the memo the boss is sending to his employees on the floor to do work. The thyroid is the employee. the hormones are the employee's production. Well, let's say the employer just sucks. He's not a good manager. He's not paying attention. And so he's not really increasing his memo saying, hey, do more work, even though they're not producing enough outcome. Their production is low. So you could have normal TSH and low T4 hormone because your brain isn't communicating, probably because you're stressed. Stress has a huge impact. The adrenal health has a huge impact on the function of your brain, which is why stress affects like every single thing in the endocrine system, all of your hormones, because all of those hormones are stimulated by your brain. It's the brain communicating to your entire endocrine system, hey, produce hormones. So if you're stressed out, the brain doesn't function properly. It's not sending enough memos out. You have an imbalance of hormones. So we can have a lot of issues, or it could be vice versa. Your TSH could be getting driven down. It's actually, it could be getting elevated and driving more signal, even though it doesn't really need to. We also have issues. Your TSH and T4 could both be completely optimal, but your T3 is low, and your T3 is what your body actually uses. Most of your cells are using T3. Why our body, why this is how we're designed, who knows? But this is how we're designed. We have to make this hormone first, and then we have to convert it to this, right? There's probably some safety mechanism in there. But the issue is that that conversion primarily happens in the liver and the gut. It doesn't happen in the thyroid. So, and this is why allopathic medicine doesn't look at T3, because it's not seen as a thyroid problem. But it's going to, low T3 conversion is going to have, and it's listed as, this also doesn't help, it's listed as 3 different things in the literature. And it's been in the literature for 30 years. And it can be hard to see how much there actually is on this because it's listed as 3 different things. And so we know it's there. We know it's a problem. It can have all of the symptoms because that's the active version. So if your body could have enough T4, but what if it can't convert it? Or if it's over converting it to what's called reverse T3, which is the storage version of that.
Right.
There's a mechanism there, but we're over converting that because in time of stress and different things, our body wants to, your T3 regulates your metabolism. Doctors are also really afraid to prescribe T3 and use T3 therapy because back in the 90s, a lot of weight loss clinics were using T because it's that potent at metabolism and weight loss. They were prescribing T3 as a weight loss drug. They were giving it to people who weren't hypothyroid. States of hyperthyroid are incredibly dangerous. It's why when you have hyperthyroidism, the routine treatment is to actually remove the thyroid gland itself, put you in a full hypothyroid state and just give you hormones for the rest of your life. Because you can go into cardiac arrest and stroke and all these things because it controls everything. It regulates so many different areas of your health, including your heart and your heart rate and function. So being in a hyper state, it's like it's like giving your heart adrenaline nonstop, basically. Right. So it could be dangerous. And that's what happened. These weight loss clinic patients were going into cardiac arrest because of the T3. It was overstimulating them, putting them into a hyper state. And especially doctors who are older and who were around during that time period are terrified of T3.
Gotcha.
And again, it's really not the solution. And it's also not the solution to give someone who has a T3 issue more T4, which is usually what happens.
Because if you can't convert it, what's the point?
Exactly. If we can't convert, what's the point? It's not a supply issue. There's plenty of T4. Yeah. See, and this is what's crazy. You get this in a matter of seconds of hearing this. It's just logical. But doctors, it's like, they get told one thing and so they don't, and they never even look there to know that's the problem. So most doctors are only running 1 to maybe 3 labs. The bare minimum you should run is 6. In my practice, I actually look at 41 different markers as a minimum for all of my thyroid clients, because I don't want to just know where the problem in the thyroid is. Because each area that could have a dysfunction, we have 5 major patterns of dysfunction in hypothyroidism. Each one of those patterns could have multiple causes. So we have to look at a myriad of different things to start seeing what truly is causing that problem. With those labs, and then a health questionnaire that I take that's several questions of basically just on a scale of symptoms, like do you have the symptom every day or not at all? We can start to see this whole body picture to see where the cause actually is. And once we have the cause, we can remove it. We can heal, we can give the body what it needs to heal from that. And then the thyroid isn't hypo anymore, can actually do its job properly. And that's how I get clients off of thyroid hormones. Now, one of the problems with Hashimoto's is depending on how far along it is, there could be so much destruction that the thyroid never gets back to full functioning. And so some people may have to be on thyroid hormone for the rest of their life. My goal is that we reduce their need for it still and keep it from needing more.
Gotcha.
So at the very least, that's our goal, is to keep you from needing more. Ideally, we get you to needing less, and optimal, like fingers crossed, let's see if we can get there. So you don't need it at all. And someone who doesn't have Hashimoto's, there's really not a reason, if you have non-autoimmune hypothyroidism, that we shouldn't get you to a point where you don't need the hormones anymore. So we should be able to, it might take some time to fully dig and figure out what, the source of the toxicity or the imbalances and things like that, but we should be able to get you to that point.
I see. So it could be a combination of toxins or lifestyle stress, that you have to ferret out how that would be taking place in that person's lifestyle, because it's going to be different for each person, or some combination of it would be different for each person.
And that's the thing, is we have to figure out what it is for you. There's not this one size fits all, just here, take this medication, and when it stops working, we'll give you more, which is what most doctors are doing. I even see it in a lot of, even alternative doctors. They're just giving hormones. They're never really and all they do is they give they give N.T.P, or natural desiccated thyroid. So it's a more complex of thyroid hormones. We actually have several. We have T1, T2, T3, T4. So there's a complex of thyroid hormones. And so basically they're just giving essentially they're giving natural bioidentical hormones instead of synthetic hormones. And a lot of times that's the natural approach. I'm like, no, you're still not figuring out why the thyroid isn't working right in the first place. That's how we actually solve something. And yeah, it can be toxicity, it can be inflammation, it could be stress, it can be nutrient deficiencies, it can be a combination of those. So we have to find those, remove them, and remove the cause of them, like nutrient deficiencies. Was it poor diet? Was it a combination of poor diet and digestive issues, so you're not absorbing them? What's causing the inflammation? Where is the toxicity coming from? Is it the chemicals that you have, whether it's cleaning products, it's hygiene products, work exposure? Like, what is it that is bringing that toxicity burden in? Do you have silver fillings in your mouth that's leaking mercury? Like, where are these things coming from? Mercury is huge for thyroid. Actually, there's a couple of good papers looking at the TPO antibody, so one of those for Hashimoto's, linked with mercury toxicity. So whether you have mercury fillings, or you're a dental hygienist or a dentist who is helping put those in, and you're breathing that off-gassing in, and they've actually looked at those in the dental field having mercury toxicity and a higher risk for Hashimoto's thyroiditis due to TPO antibodies.
Interesting. Wow. So you could tell, so would stress, like someone's personal stress or dietary stress, throw off antibodies as well? It's not just a reaction to a toxin?
It's going to make you more susceptible to these different things. Yeah. So the stress itself won't cause, the excess cortisol itself won't cause a rise in antibodies, but it can weaken the immune system so that it does. So now, and it could impact your gut health, so that now we have dysfunction of the gut, and now we do get leaky gut, and now those things get in, and you have a weakened immune system.
Gotcha. Now I run across a lot of people in the low carb and fasting, that community where a lot of people are practicing both of those with exercise.
Yeah.
So that, and the fear, and sometimes complaint, but the fear is often lowering of thyroid through
let's get into this.
fasting workouts, low carb, stress. So I'd love to unpack that. I mean, that'd be great to get a better look at that.
There's about 2 papers in the history that I've ever seen, and I look at them all the time. They're horribly done.
Okay.
So we know, you and your audience are probably very familiar that there's a transition period when going from standard American higher carb diet to low carb. There's a 3 or 4 week transition where you're going to feel like crap.
Yeah.
Both of these studies, one of them was like a week long. One of them was like 3 weeks long. We know that those are absolutely miserable studies in low carb ketogenic diets.
Yeah.
Because yes, the body, it's a huge transition for the body. Of course, there's going to be, we can have some lowering of these different functions. We can have some different things going on and some imbalance. We also know when you get past that, you feel freaking amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You feel way better.
Mm-hmm.
There's also some theories. Again, we don't test because we see some lowering of thyroid hormone, but completely absent of symptoms. Hypothyroidism really needs both. If your levels are low, but lower, but you feel fine, are you really hypothyroid?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
now we
some
also
will
have to,
see TSH elevated, but no symptoms, asymptomatic, but doing less of low carb and fasting and high intensity exercise. But the TSH might be, spiking or a little high,
yeah,
but thyroid normal and asymptomatic.
yeah. So
And
if you're asymptomatic, do we really have a problem?
yeah,
Now
that's
again, we also
is
have
the
to look
TSH
at,
causing extra stress? That would be the question.
yeah.
Is it
Well, the other
elevated
thing we have,
TSH causing stress on the hormone on
yes, and the other
the
thing we want to
gland?
look at is we do need to be careful that we aren't covering the fatigue of hypothyroidism with cortisol. Right. So cortisol is
Mm,
stimulatory, adrenaline is stimulatory. So we need to make sure that it's not being cut, because that can happen sometimes too. I've seen it. And that's where all of a sudden, after months of just high end, they were basically getting covered by adrenaline or coffee or cortisol,
gotcha.
and then all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore and they bonk months later. So we do need to be mindful. There is some things there, but there is not and this is where I remind people all the time, oh, keto caused this, keto caused that. Show me the mechanism in which a ketone caused this problem. And that is when you can tell me that a ketogenic diet or a state of ketosis
Right.
causes this. Haven't seen it. Not once. No study even comes close for almost anything. Now, you may not be doing keto correctly for you. There's however many people there are in this planet, whatever we're at right now, and however many people are doing keto, that's how many different ways there are to do a ketogenic diet. What I have found is that when I take a client, and I don't put every client on keto, but I have used it a lot because I used to work with truck drivers primarily, long haul truck drivers who deal with tons of metabolic diseases, diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol issues, obesity, and they often had thyroid issues alongside that. I have worked with probably easily over 100 clients who had thyroid issues alongside those other things, and all of them were on a very low carb or even ketogenic diet successfully. Now, we had to address other imbalances because many of them came to me because their symptoms of hypothyroidism did get worse when they went low carb. We kept them low carb. We balanced their body and system. Now they can stay low carb and they feel great. Their thyroid numbers improve, their energy improves, their symptoms are gone, and they're losing weight and they're feeling great while remaining on a ketogenic diet. So it's like, yes, we need to address these imbalances. Just like I tell people with digestive issues, like, oh, I went on keto and now I'm getting gallbladder pains. Keto caused me to have, a gallbladder issue. It's like, well, no, it didn't. You had a gallbladder problem to begin with. You just weren't eating fat, so you didn't know, because the gallbladder never had to secrete bile very much.
Level.
Now you're eating lots of fat, and that has to secrete a lot, and now you're getting pains. The high fat diet didn't make you it didn't cause the problem. It just made you aware. Now you could stop the high fat diet and pretend that it went away, but that problem is still there. So the solution isn't to just stop the diet and go along and pretend everything was fine. The solution is to fix the problem, because your body should be able to tolerate a decent amount of fat. And if it can't, that's a problem of dysfunction. And we need to fix it, or else it's going to become a bigger problem down the road.
Gotcha. Wow.
So yeah, the studies, there is zero clear studies that actually show a mechanism of the metabolic state of ketosis. Now, what can happen with women is that a ketogenic diet is incredibly satiating. Right? We know it's it's why it works so well for weight loss.
Right.
There's a really cool study. It's 24 weeks long where they supplied food. It's one of the longest done studies of supplied food, looking at dietary impacts. And they saw what was amazing. It's literally what every weight loss drug tries to do. A ketogenic or lower carb diet increased satiety, increased satiety. So decreased hunger.
Right.
While increasing your BMR, your basal metabolic rate, how many calories your body burns at rest. That is literally
It's
the
a goal.
aha moment of weight loss. Like,
Exactly.
if my body can burn more energy and be less hungry, that's
Yeah.
all you need for weight loss. Like, that is like, and that's why so many people do so well, because that's what a low carb diet does.
Right.
So now, because of that, we know that a very hypocaloric, so low calorie state, can induce hypothalamic hypothyroidism. So that's your brain, your hypothalamus,
Mhm.
it goes into a hypo state. Which means it's not producing enough TSH to tell your thyroid to produce more.
Mm,
Protein and nutrients are also super important. If we undereat protein,
right.
we undereat calories, we are running, I see it all the time. Women are eating like 40, 50, 60 grams of protein on a ketogenic diet, but they're still afraid of meat. And they're working out, and they're eating like 1,000 calories. And they're like, oh, keto caused me to do it. And they're like, well, I was full. It's because we have to move things around. Many of them also have digestive problems. But I've
Yeah.
told over and over again, if you're only eating 1,000 calories a day on keto and you are completely satisfied and stuff, you have digestive issues almost every single time. Poor digestion can lead to poor appetite, which makes sense. If your food isn't moving through your digestive system fast
Right.
enough,
Right.
and so it's sitting in your stomach way long, of course you're not going to be hungry. There's no
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
Your body's, it's not empty. It needs to be empty to send a signal to your brain to say, hey, tell us to eat more. And so if that's not happening, so again, I've had clients who are like, oh, I'm full on 1,000 calories. Like, I feel satisfied. And they're eating like 40 grams of protein, a bunch of fat. I'm like, let's lower the fat, increase the protein, increase your veggies, fix your digestion. And like that, they're able to eat more, their digestion improves, their symptoms go away, their labs improve, and they've
Mhm.
remained on a ketogenic diet. Most of my clients have been women. And I work with them
Sure.
on low carb diets and ketogenic diets, and their labs on thyroid don't get worse; they only improve.
That's
So
awesome.
you are going to have a very hard time convincing me that
Mhm.
ketogenic diets, a state of ketosis, can cause hypothyroidism in a woman or anyone. Now, can trying a ketogenic diet make you worse? Yes, probably because you weren't doing it right for your body, or you have other things that you need to address so that your body can get into that state. But it does not mean, we have to be careful to make sure that we don't mean that the state of ketosis, which is the natural metabolic state, does
Right.
not harm the body.
Right. Yeah. And many times it's like you said, the stress of it, the transition of it reveals a problem that
Mhm.
was already there, that needs to be dealt with. It wasn't triggered by it wasn't created by the diet. And so many
Yeah.
people, they say they're doing keto and they're doing this dirty keto processed food version
Yeah,
of
that's a whole
it.
nother problem.
That's
Yeah.
another problem. They're not eating whole food. They're eating
Yeah.
supplements, and some of them with certain fibers and things that are probably irritating their gut, but also
Yeah.
just they're not getting the whole food meat, like you mentioned, the protein
One of
and
the things
natural
that's
fat out there.
really interesting that no one is really talking about. I'm not a fan of most grains, especially processed grains and,
Yeah.
wheat and fortified wheat. But while the nutrients, and specifically B vitamins and iron, that are required to be put into any wheat product,
Yeah.
right? There's B vitamins. They're not great nutrient availability, but there are some, and iron
Right.
being put into those. If you cut those out and you do not increase your whole food sources of those nutrients, which is they're put there because so many people do not eat those foods, such as organ meats,
Right.
right, that are rich in these things, you now become deficient. And guess what you need for your thyroid and your metabolism and
Metabolism.
your energy? B
B
vitamins and
vitamins and
iron,
iron. Yeah.
right? So
Absolutely.
now you're becoming, you're deficient in those things, and it's, but again, it's not that and now mass media likes to say, oh, mainstream dietetics and things like that, oh, you need these things to get those nutrients. It's like, well, no, they're not in there in the first place.
They're fortified.
Grains don't have those. They're fortified. You're putting, so
Yeah.
first of all, I could just take a supplement, a way better quality availability
Right.
of those nutrients, get them that way, or
Red meat.
eat your leafy greens, eat your red meat, eat your organ meats,
Yeah.
get those from
Yeah.
your food. And if you eat a proper nutrient dense nose to tail diet, you're going to get those things. But again, like you said, a lot of people are doing keto with like processed cheese and meats and, soybean based mayonnaise. Still, keto, I tell people all the time, keto is a horrible measure for your diet if you just say it's keto, because Hellman's mayonnaise and ballpark hot dogs is keto. That
Right.
doesn't mean it's going to be healthy. I would argue it's probably more, it's just as unhealthy in different ways
Yeah.
than continuing to eat. I would rather you eat a high carb whole food diet
Right.
than a junk food keto diet, because the quality is far more important. We see
Right.
how bad processed oils are. They're
Oh yeah.
horrendous. So,
Yeah.
we start downing Hellman's mayonnaise, like, let's, and American sliced Kraft
Cheese
cheese, whatever,
and
wrapped in,
lunch meat.
yeah, wrapped in God knows what lunch meat, like
Right.
mystery meat. Like, no, that's not healthy.
Right. Yeah. There's all the nutrient quality has been extracted, or if it was ever there, and it's just full of fillers, like you said.
Yeah.
So what I know, obviously, as a primal coach, you started with whole food.
Yeah.
That was the big change, is you started eating whole food.
Yep.
So I'm guessing a lot of your early steps with people would be to get them eating whole food and a transition away from processed food, to see how that probably just wipes away a lot of symptoms right there.
It's amazing how, and I tell practitioners all the time, practitioners, they're like, oh, what do I start this client? I'm like, literally do nothing but change their diet. Give them 30 days. It is amazing how much money you can save on stuff. Like, I work with supplements a lot and try and resolve problems, and we utilize those. But I want someone to be on whole food for like 30 days first.
Sure.
Because
Change habits.
I want to make sure you're actually going to stick with this. Because if you're not, there's no point in buying the supplements, right? There's no point in going and using all the other things. So I do it for two reasons. I suggest, before you even come to me, right? Like, try going on a whole food diet. I don't care what. I don't care if it's paleo, keto, Whole30. Just try eating primarily real whole food that doesn't require a package for 30 days. One, you're going to see a change. And I want you to see that change from only real whole foods. You actually believe in the power of nutrition. We have this subconscious thought that if we could make all the changes in the world, but if we also take a pill, whether it's a supplement or medication, at the same time, this is what made all the change. It was the pill. For some reason, it couldn't have possibly been the food. And so I don't want you to have all your belief and power in this. I want you to believe in the food. So make those changes, feel it. And we may not need half of these once you make the changes in the food. We just may not need to go through those things. I have protocols that work amazing for getting you off of PPIs and acid reflux and heartburn and getting rid of all of that. But a lot of people, those symptoms completely go away just by eating real whole food. It's simply a result of junk processed food in your diet.
Yeah.
You get rid of those, you simply don't have the symptoms anymore. We don't need to spend $100 in supplements for that.
Right. So an elimination diet, in the sense of getting toxins.
Yeah, and depending on the individual, we'll step down. Some people are ready to go right to paleo. Some people want to kind of step down. So we might just do like a real whole food diet. We're literally just getting rid of processed sugars, processed oils. We're getting rid of gluten. We still might have some whole, we might have rice and oats and things like that in their whole form. We might have some legumes that we're preparing properly. We're still going to include some of those. And then we might step down to a paleo diet. Pretty much anyone that comes to me, my goal is to get them to at least a paleo diet. And it's not forever. I don't eat paleo anymore exclusively. I have legumes and I have grains in my diet every once in a while. But I call it the human reset. Like, we need to get you there so that we can calm everything down in your body. And then you can actually begin to tolerate those foods again.
Gotcha. So why don't we, this has been amazing. This is a wealth of insight here. How would you, say, give someone, like, other than what you just said, give someone some baby steps? Like, if they're feeling issues, like you said, before they even come to you, what does that look like to them? I mean, you've described it to some degree, but I mean, they have to, I assume it would vary some from person to person depending on their taste, but do you give people some sort of framework for what whole food diet will look like, what ratios of certain foods would be? I mean, do you give them targets for protein? Do you give them targets for?
Let's walk through this. The first thing I tell people to do is eliminate what I consider the 3 public health enemies.
I got you.
It is processed oils, processed sugar, and gluten. These are the 3 words. And what's funny, again, because I have worked a lot in the keto community. I've been in it for 5 or 6 years. Everyone thinks the sugar is number 1. Processed oils and gluten. If you could only pick 2 of the 3, I'm keeping the sugar. Sugar, I mean, yes, it can lead to insulin problem, but we can also just burn it off.
It's not as inflammatory though as the other 2.
The inflammation of the oils and the gluten is way worse.
Yeah.
So getting rid of those 3 things. If you did nothing else and you just started with those 3 things, by getting rid of those 3 things, you pretty much go on a whole food diet. Like, you can't eat processed food without
What's
eating
left?
one of those three things.
Yeah.
I mean, even the gluten-free section is going to be full of processed sugar and processed oils for the most part.
Yeah.
So you still can't even go to the gluten-free aisle, which is not a good idea
And by
anyways.
just for clarity, for some people who don't realize, because a lot of people don't realize how bad these oils are, and they're still called healthy by
Yeah.
our authorities, like canola and sunflower, and they just sound healthy.
Yeah.
Soybean, corn oil.
Or we
Yeah.
call them vegetable oils. We don't have vegetable oils. Like, who has anyone ever eaten broccoli oil? Like,
No,
we don't have vegetable oils.
even
We have
corn doesn't really
broccoli.
isn't oily. It's a starch.
No. Yeah, it's like, where is that? Like, do you realize how much corn you would have to break down to get oil?
A canola
Like, it's
or a
yeah.
sun. I mean, yeah.
So
So
they're seeds. They're really seeds of grasses, right? So the grains are seeds of grasses. That's primarily where these oils are coming from. They're highly processed. Number one rule: if it comes in a clear plastic container, don't buy it. I don't care if it's extra virgin olive oil in a clear plastic, container. Don't buy it, right? So, and really, olive isn't a vegetable; it's a
it's
fruit.
a fruit, right?
Avocado oil is a fruit. We should be eating fruit and animal oils.
Yeah, it's a completely
Olive
different
oil,
type of fat.
avocado oil.
It's
Yeah,
a different. It's a
those are the things
monosaturated
we
instead of poly, right?
Yes, exactly. So they're one, extra virgin olive oil is incredibly rich in antioxidants and polyphenols that help protect it. You can actually cook with a good quality olive oil
Mhm.
because it's so rich in antioxidants and polyphenols that help protect the fat from being oxidized. They've actually done
Yeah.
studies of keeping olive oil heated for like 24 hours, and there was
Mm.
almost no oxidation. It does
Wow.
really well as long as you're not like blasting the crap out of it, which you
Right.
shouldn't do with any of them. But
Right.
if you're sauteing or baking or roasting, good quality extra virgin olive oil is completely fine. Greek being some of the absolute best if you can get real Greek olive oil. So yeah, start with these good, just eat real whole food and literally just try for 30 days. I don't care if you go find a Paleo Reset, if you go and do a whole 30, like they're all pretty similar. And
Mhm.
those make it easier because now you're getting guides. Right now you've got some
Right.
outline.
Some
It's
structure.
really gonna,
Yeah.
it's gonna give you some structure to that. Reach out to me. I've got a 30-day Paleo Reset, really easy couple page handout that I hand to people. All
Mm.
my clients get it. I have a 10-page document that describe. I have three different levels of my dietary plan. So one is just like real whole food, then it's paleo, and then it's like a paleo ketogenic diet. And so it breaks down what those look like, what you can and can't
Wow.
eat. It's got a shopping guide of almost 200 or maybe over 200 foods. People are like, oh my goodness, what am I going to eat? I'm like, there's over 200 foods right here, like real whole foods, vegetables, meats, eggs. Like, trust me, there's plenty if you just look and open your eyes a bit. And it's a PDF, so you can save it right on your smartphone. So it's really easy to take with you. It has the clean 15, 30 dozen list on there. It's got
Mm.
room for notes. You can add some things to it. It's super awesome. And just start with that. If you're just like, hey, I would love that, reach out to me, send me a message on social media, email me, like, I would love that guide. I want to do a 30-day reset to see if I can do this or just to feel better. And it's amazing what can happen. Like I said, most of my problems went away within 30 days of just doing that. Like, there was some other stuff that were still residual, but most of my problems got way better just in 30 days. And it is mind blowing.
Mm.
Literally, no matter how bad you feel right now, what can actually happen in 30 days. And literally start there. Now, if you're dealing with things like you think you might have a thyroid issue, and the more of these you have, the more likely it is. You struggle with weight loss, you have depression, brain fog, which crazy. So the outer third of your eyebrow, if that is thinning or missing, can be a thyroid disorder. That can actually be related to thyroid. I don't remember why, but it is. Hair loss as a whole, um,
Hmm.
fatigue, many of these things are related to thyroid. Now, they're not, you could have these and have something else, but they could be a sign of hypothyroidism. Regardless if your doctor has said he checked or she checked those values and everything was normal. My freebie on my website is your labs are normal, but you feel anything but. Like, here, take this. Here's 3 reasons why. And then you're going to get 3 more emails that walk through hypothyroidism, some of the stuff that we talked about, but in more detail. We're going to talk about the 5 major patterns. We're going to talk about why you don't feel better even after taking hormone support. And we're going to talk about the 5 things you can begin doing. We look at addressing nutrient deficiencies, changing your diet, getting a plan, like figuring all of these things out, reducing your stress, working with a practitioner so you can actually have someone who puts this all together. But you can get all those things for free on my website. So you just sign
Hmm.
up for that. It's just start by removing those 3 things from your diet. And if you
Sure.
haven't yet, you're gonna feel a lot better. Now, a lot of your listeners probably have, but some new listeners may not. And so if you've done those things, if you already have those things out and you're still struggling, you're lower carb, you're keto, you're real food, and you're still struggling with fatigue, depression, weight issues, 100% go sign up for that email freebie. You
Yeah.
also you'll get a short-term promotional offer. So if you're like, I want to work with you, seriously, just go sign up for my email series, learn, and you're going to get a discount at the end of it. So you might as well take advantage of that.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. But I mean, learning in the process, you're teaching them while you're helping them. So they're
Yes.
going to walk away understanding not only what's going on with their body, but how to move forward and structure their diet and their lifestyle a little better just from what
Yeah.
their takeaways. Yeah.
Yeah, my goal is that you don't need me forever. Like I want you to be, which is it's a really difficult business model
Uh,
because I'm constantly
yes.
getting, I'm losing clients, right? Because they don't need me anymore. It's
Right.
like I'm fixing your problems, but not only am I fixing them, is I want you to be educated and empowered to understand what is going on with your health. One of the things, it has blown away every single client of mine. I've blown away doctors and people who work in the medical field when we go over labs. I actually look at them on my own time and I pull them up on the PDF in my computer and I screen record as I go through and analyze the lab. So I'm looking at them. You're essentially watching because I'm going to screen record. I'm going to screen capture and record it so that it's always yours to keep. I'm going to say, cool, this, this is completely out of range or this is out of the functional optimal range. This might be why. This relates to this. This is why we're going to do all this. So you're not only going to be like, oh yeah, like these things are out of range. You're going to know why, and you're going to know how all of these are related and why we're doing the steps that we're doing based off of your labs. And it blows people away. And again, I just want you to be educated. I want you to
Sure.
understand what is going on.
Awesome. Wow. That's fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Well,
I've gotten a lot of people get blown away by that. I love it. It's awesome.
well, yeah. I mean, you're just pulling back the curtain and saying, this is it. This is what's affecting you. People, I think, would probably respond well to having, not just some black box of here, take this.
Yeah.
It'll fix it, probably, but you're actually revealing how their body works. And so they're probably going to be much more, you find that if people have a better understanding of how these things work and how their body works, that they're more likely to stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah, because they actually understand. They're understood. They're not just like, "Hey, take this; it's going to work."
Yeah.
Here's why it's going to work. Here's what's wrong, and here's how we're going to fix it. So yeah, they're more trusting. Which then that's a whole different conversation of. But
Right.
when your brain actually understands and believes in something, it's much more powerful.
Yes, they're much more likely to follow through and stay
Yep.
there. Yeah, and that's when you get the healing is over time, that consistency, the
Exactly.
maintenance over time, allowing the body to heal. That's awesome. Thank you, Michael. How I know you're at Fundamenta Wellness, so there's not an L at the end. It's Fundamenta
Correct.
at or with the underscore wellness, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes, as well as to your website, which is fundamentalwellness.com. Is there a link? Should they look for that link to that 30 days of, or is that something you
Yeah,
send
so
out directly?
if that's something they want, literally just reach out to me. I mean, you can find me on Facebook, you can find me on Instagram, and
Sure.
just send me a DM or comment on a post, or
Mm.
my contact information is on my website. You can email me
Awesome.
there. I don't have it. Maybe I'll set it up somewhere eventually on my website where people can just grab it as an extra freebie.
Mm.
As of right now, I don't have it set up. But completely, if anyone is hearing this and they want that, reach out to me and I can send it, no problem.
Absolutely. Sounds like a great resource and again, like you said, or something to help them just get a better understanding and experience. That it isn't magic. It's not a magic pill. It's
Correct.
basically getting out of your body's way to
Yeah.
allow it to heal itself and function the way it's supposed to. And everything you've been putting in it is actually interfering with the natural flow or the natural healing process of the immune system. We're creating interference.
Exactly.
Yeah. Awesome, Michael. Thank you so much. I'm going to link to those in the show notes so people can find you and get that freebie. Thank you so much. Do you have anything coming up in the work? Do you any kind of like, well, of course we've been kind of limited by events. I think you should write a book. Personally, I think you're one of those people that needs to write a book.
It's one of those things. I am amazed. I can talk all day long. I get so flustered when I try and write anything. I need a ghostwriter. So anyone out there wants to help ghostwrite a book, you reach out to me because I can give you hours and hours of audio.
Yeah, you've got the experience between clients and yourself. I'd say you've got a lot of knowledge there that could be extract it and really be very helpful for people. I'm amazed at how this kind of flows out of you. Like you said, you can talk for hours about it. So very, very helpful, because so many people are struggling with this and they're really feel lost and frustrated and feel like they don't know what to do. So I hope whoever's listening, if you're hearing, as you're listening to this and you're struggling with it, reach out to Michael and get some help, get some insight, have a conversation and
I'd love
see
to
if you can.
talk.
Awesome. You'll definitely got to learn something when you do. All right. Well, thanks again. I hope to have you back. But I appreciate your time and everything you've shared. Truly a wealth of knowledge here. Thanks so much.
Thanks. It was great being here.